Πώς ήταν ο Stan Lee από κοντά, ποια ήταν η αντίδραση του κόσμου όταν είδανε το μαύρο κοστούμι του Spider-Man, ποια μεταφυσική εμπειρία είχε ο ηθοποιός που έπαιξε τον John Constantine. Όλες αυτές οι ερωτήσεις θα σας απαντηθούν σε αυτό εδώ το επεισόδιο. Καλώς ήρθατε στο Geek Detective. Είμαι ο Τάσος και πίσω από την κάμερα ο Βαγγέλης. Κάθε Κυριακή εντοπίζουμε για εσάς τα καλύτερα που έχει να προσφέρει η geek κουλτούρα. Από games, comics, ταινίες, σειρές και άλλα τέτοια ωραία πραγματάκια. Πλέον μπορείτε να στηρίξετε ενεργά το κανάλι μας, να πάρετε ειδικό σηματάκι supporter, ειδικά emojis με τις φάτσες μας, αλλά και να βλέπετε τα βίντεο μας πιο νωρίς από τους υπόλοιπους, μόνο με €1 συνδρομή. Έτσι για το support. Εναλλακτικά μπορείτε να μας κεράσετε ένα καφέ μέσω του Buy Me a Coffee στην περιγραφή. Όπως κάθε χρονιά, έτσι και στο Athenscon που πέρασε, κάναμε κάποια πάνελς με καλεσμένους από το εξωτερικό. Στα πάνελς αυτά, όσοι δεν έρχεστε, χάνετε πραγματικά, γιατί πάντα οι καλεσμένοι μας λένε πολύ ενδιαφέρουσες ιστορίες. Φέτος μαζέψαμε κάποιες από αυτές για να πάρετε εδώ μία γεύση. Στο πρώτο κλιπ, ο θρυλικός DeFalco, συγγραφέας του Spider-Man και editor-in-chief της Marvel για πολλά χρόνια, μας μιλάει για τον Stan Lee και το πόσο σημαντικός ήταν για τα comics, για το πώς άρχισε να γράφει το Spider-Man, για το μαύρο κοστούμι που αργότερα έγινε ο Venom και ποια ήταν η αντίδραση του κοινού σε αυτό.
When I look back at what Stan Lee did for comics, I think Stan Lee's biggest contribution to comics was he introduced soap opera to superhero comics. Because before Stan Lee, superheroes only cared about saving their secret identities and saving the world. When Stan Lee came in, he made us care about who Spider-Man was dating, whether or not he picked up milk for Aunt May, whether or not the Thing could find a parking space for the Fantastic Four car. He made us care about all those things that up until that time we never even thought about. I believe very strongly in soap opera and comics.
How did you get along with Stan Lee?
I got along very well with Stan. You know, in the movies he comes across as this sweet, loving guy. That was Stan Lee. That really was Stan Lee. He was the sweetest, most compassionate guy I've ever run across. Stan, when he had a magical power, when you were talking to Stan, he made you feel like the most important person in his universe. And then he walked away and forgot your name. But I'm just kidding. Although every once in a while he would call me Tony. I was asked to fill in on Spider-Man, and the editor, a gentleman by the name of Danny Fingroth, came in to me and he said, Roger Stern is leaving Spider-Man because he wants to write the Avengers. And I laughed at him. I said, boy, are you in trouble, because only an idiot is going to follow Roger Stern. And he says, well, I think I know my idiot. And he asked me to do it. And I said, Danny, I don't write that kind of dialogue. I can't do Spider-Man's dialogue. He says, I think you can. I remember, looking at the costume. It had some very special additional powers. And I went to Jim Shooter and I said, okay, Spider-Man in the black costume, it can do all these amazing things. How? How does that work? And Jim Shooter, the wise gentleman that he was, turned to me and says, well, you're the writer, come up with something. But as luck happened, I happened to be reading an article about whales and the symbiotes that hang on whales and that sort of stuff. So I called Ron Friends and I said, I know how the costume works. It's an alien symbiote. And Ron said, that's terrific. When people heard that we were going to change Spider-Man's costume before they saw anything, we got a ton of hate mail. Readers were writing in saying, I'll never buy another Spider-Man comic book. I'll never buy another Marvel comic book. You guys are crazy. Jim Shooter came in at one point and said to me, what issue does Spider-Man get the new costume? I said, 252. He says, get rid of it in 253. He says, everybody hates it. I said, nobody's seen it yet. Once the black costume came out, we started getting in a ton of mails, everybody saying how much they loved it. And then at a certain point, Shooter came into my office and said, I hear you're getting rid of the black costume. What are you, crazy? And I said, Jim, you told me to get rid of it. I don't remember saying that. He said, what issue? You're getting rid of it. I forget the issue number. He says, you can't do it. I said, Jim, that book is already at the printer. I said, well, you're going to ruin Spider-Man. Bring it back. What are you, crazy?
Σε αυτό το κλιπ μιλάμε με τον Matt Ryan, τον ηθοποιό που έπαιξε τον John Constantine για 8 χρόνια σε διάφορες παραγωγές και ήταν και η φωνή του Edward Kenway, τον πρωταγωνιστή του Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Μας απαντάει επιτέλους για το πώς προφέρεται το όνομα του Constantine, αλλά και πόσο σημαντικός είναι ο χαρακτήρας για αυτόν. Σε άλλο επεισόδιο έχουμε πει το πώς κάποιοι από τους συγγραφείς που έγραψαν τα κόμιξ είχαν περίεργες μεταφυσικές εμπειρίες και πιστεύουν ότι αυτός ο χαρακτήρας υπάρχει στην πραγματικότητα. Φυσικά δεν κρατηθήκαμε και κάναμε την ίδια ερώτηση και στον Matt Ryan, ο οποίος επίσης μοιράστηκε μαζί μας μια περίεργη εμπειρία που είχε.
In the comics, there's actually, I can't remember which one because there's a lot and I've read them all. I think I've read them all. There's one panel when someone calls him Constantine and he says, no, that's Time. So technically it's supposed to be Constantine. Yeah. But there was a decision made above my head when we were doing the TV show that it would be Constantine. And what's great is when we did the crossover with Lucifer, if any of you guys saw that episode.
Yeah.
So I've known Tom Ellis for a long time and we have mutual friends and we just started riffing, jamming, having a banter, you know, and these characters really connected well and we connected well. And I called him Lucy. And then so I made this up and then he made up hey, Constantine. And then I came back and that's Constantine. So all of this was made up in the moment. So I found that kind of funny.
Always a pleasure to see you, Lucy.
Consider us even, John Constantine.
Constantine.
Is it? I don't care.
You know, my show, Constantine, was cancelled after 13 episodes, which we were all very disappointed about because we felt we were just getting going. And I never thought in a million years that if you're on a TV show that gets cancelled after one season, or even not even a full season, like 13 episodes, that you would end up playing a character for 8-9 years. Every time I thought my journey with him was over, they kept on pulling me back in to do something, whether it was an animated movie or on Arrow and then DC's Legends. And I don't know. I think, you know, in life, you never say never, right? You know, after my show was cancelled after 13 episodes, I was like, all right, that's done. And then they pulled me back in. And then that went on for years. So never say never. I would say, like, you know, the context will have to be right. You know, I'm a bit older now. It would have to be R-rated and not PG. You know, I want to do the Hellblazer version that we all love. Whoever has the power to decide who plays the character next, I'm a fan of John Constantine. So whoever plays him, I'll be supportive and interested to see what they do with the role, and I'll be a fan of their work. Or maybe there's some crazy crossover, you know, in 10 years' time, and I turn up on a Zimmer frame, you know, all grey and smoking. Maybe that will happen. I don't know. You never say never in this business, but these things are out of your hands. And he's a wonderful character, and I feel lucky to have played him as much as I could, really, you know. The morally grey area for me is much more human than some characters that we see in the arts, you know, like, and those are the most interesting ones. So I lean towards them, and I find they're much more satisfying to play, and there's much more to get your teeth into. One thing I say about John Constantine is I don't just think, and obviously I'm biased, right, because I've played the character, but I don't just think that he's one of the best comic book characters. I think he's one of the best literary characters written. Like, as a human being, this guy is like, he goes through it all, man. Like, he's a wonderfully complex human being. But on the other hand, he's very, like, you get his heart straight like this. It's the same as us as human beings. We're so complex, but at the same time, we can be one thing in one moment, and then a million balls of contradictions in the next.
We know that famous authors who have written Constantine, like Alan Moore, who created him, or Jamie Delano, who wrote the first Hellblazer comics, they've had weird experiences. Like, they think they've met the character in person, and that it's a real person. It's not like a comic book character. And as far as I understand, you've also had a weird experience with this.
You know, I tell you one funny experience that I had is we were shooting this episode and we're in Atlanta in the US, and we were shooting in a mausoleum, and we were inside the mausoleum doing all the work that we needed to do for that night. And one of the ADs came up to me and said, "You're never going to guess this. There's a gravestone out there with Constantine on it." And I was like, "Yeah, right. So me and her walking into this graveyard in the black of night with torches, looking through these gravestones. I'm like, for one, I'm like, "What are you doing? Dragging me out? What's happening here?" And lo and behold, there was a gravestone with Constantine on it. And the font was kind of the same font that was in the comics and that we were using. And it spun me, man. I was like, what the is going on? If any of you know the comics, there's this famous picture of him sitting next to a gravestone smoking a cigarette with a demon hand coming out, right? So I was like, we got to recreate it. So I've got the picture of me sitting there smoking a cigarette, like with this gravestone that says Constantine on it. And I just couldn't get over the font was the same, the gravestone. I was like, did they plan? And it wasn't. It was a real gravestone in that mausoleum. I was like, that was kind of freaky. Yeah, that was kind of freaky.
Το θέμα είναι ότι όλοι αυτοί οι συγγραφείς είναι σοβαρά και ευυπόλοιπτα άτομα, τα οποία δεν έχουν ισχυριστεί άλλες περίεργες ιστορίες ποτέ. Και δεν είπαν ότι είδαν κάποιον που ήταν ίδιος ο Κόνσταντιν. Είπαν ότι είδαν κάποιον που ήξεραν μέσα τους ότι ήταν αυτός.
Τάσο. Ναι. Είμαι ο John Constantine.
Άσε μας Κωνσταντίν από εδώ. Θέλουμε να φάμε ένα σάντουιτς με την ησυχία μας, να πούμε, και έρχεται ο κάθε Κόνσταντιν. Άσε με, κάντε να.
Στο επόμενο κλιπ μιλάμε με τον γερμανό καλλιτέχνη Bjorn Barrends, ο οποίος μας λέει πώς ξεκίνησε να δουλεύει σε αμερικάνικα κόμιξ.
Still did a lot of comic work just for myself, because I like it, and posted it on Instagram and Facebook, and that was where Todd McFarlane saw it. So I don't mainly started as a comic book artist for him. He just took me to the company and asked, "Yeah, I will give you here and there different work." And I started mainly with 3D modeling for the toys. And then I sent him one or two covers where I said, maybe I can also do some covers for your book, Spawn book. And he liked it, and he said, "Okay, we try it." We made the first cover, and it sold very well. So he said, "Okay, do more." And at one point, I just did covers, and from there, Marvel called and DC called, and then it started.
Στο τελευταίο κλιπ για σήμερα μιλάμε με έναν άλλο θρυλικό καλλιτέχνη, τον Βρετανό Liam Sharp, τον οποίο το ρωτήσαμε ποιος είναι ο αγαπημένος του χαρακτήρας από τους εμβληματικούς χαρακτήρες που έχει σχεδιάσει. Μας είπε επίσης και για μια ντροπιαστική κλίση που είχε με έναν πασίγνωστο rock star.
The one thing you realize is that if you get to draw one of the iconic characters, it doesn't matter which one it is. It doesn't matter if it's the Hulk or Spider-Man or Green Lantern or Wonder Woman or Batman. If you get one of those iconic characters that's never gone away, who's been here for 80, 85 years, you start to realize there's a reason why they stayed popular as long as they did. There's just something, they've got this weird X factor. So the reality is, the one that you love the most is the one that you're drawing.
Okay.
You know, you because you just fall in love with them all. I didn't really read Wonder Woman before I got that. I got home from I can't remember, I've been out late, and I got back to my wife one night in London, and she said, "You're never going to guess who called." I was like, I don't know. I threw a few names out, and she said, no, you're never going to guess. I said, "Okay, who was it?" Gene Simmons from Kiss had phoned us, got my number and phoned us. I was like, "What?" And she said, "Yeah, you got to call him back." So I called up Gene, and he said, actually, it was really embarrassing for me, because he said two things. "I'm a big fan of your work, and I really want you to do an X-Men Kiss comic with us." And I was like, "Oh man, that would be amazing, except I'm doing the Hulk, and there's no way I can do both. I've got to do the Hulk." And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Well, anyway, thank you. It's good to talk." And I said, "Oh, what was the second thing?" He said, what? He said, well, you said 2 things. He said, oh, just that I'm a big fan. So I made Gene Simmons tell me that he was a big fan of mine. It was stupidly embarrassing.
Αφήστε μας σχόλια για τα κλιπάκια που είδατε και ελπίζουμε να έρθετε από κοντά στα επόμενα panels που θα κάνουμε. Αυτό ήταν το Geek Detective. Αν θέλετε να στηρίξετε, ξέρετε πώς μπορείτε να το κάνετε. Like, subscribe στη δρομή μόνο με €1 ή buy me a coffee στην περιγραφή. Τα λέμε ξανά την επόμενη Κυριακή στις 10. Ίδια Geek ώρα, ίδιο Geek κανάλι.